A spanking from my favorite teacher. It is one of the ironies of my high school life that I got one of my most painful paddlings from my favorite teacher. The factors that contributed to how much it hurt adjust to how thin my gym shorts were, and the fact that she was a fit young lady with strong arms. Coach B was pretty new to the job, and I think I was one of the first girls she ever paddled. So maybe it was her inexperience combined with my thin shorts back that made it so painful. It was my own fault I was being paddled, as I went to school in a dress that was far too short, and was reported to the assistant principal. When he interviewed me, he said I'd already had one warning from him, and so this time it would mean the paddle. I did point out that the dress I had on was longer than the cheerleader's uniform we were allowed to wear on match days, but that didn't seem to cut any ice with him. So I was booked for a sore bottom. Even worse, because this was my second paddling, I would get 4 swats. I thought I'd have to bend over then and there, but the AP said he had a meeting on, so I would have to wait till later. I wasn't very pleased with this, as we had a fitness session after school with Coach B. She was young and good-looking, and we girls really liked her. She ran this fitness session for the girls' teams after school. So we team girls all willingly went along, as she was really fun. I certainly didn't want to have to take part with a sore bottom, so I waited anxiously for the call from the AP for my paddling. The call never came, so I assumed that I'd have to wait till the next day to get the spanking. I made a mental note to put on a pair of thick jeans and 2 or 3 pairs of panties. I took part in Coach B's training session with great enthusiasm. However, when it was finished and everyone was heading for the changing rooms, she called me over, and with a somewhat embarrassed look on her face told me that the AP had asked her to look after the girls' things that day as he had meetings on. She said she had dealt with another girl before she left, but hadn't wanted to spank me before the workout. She probably thought I wouldn't work out too well with a sore bottom, but she had to do it before we left school. I thought it was a bit sad. I really liked her, and I think she liked me too, was a student, and now, although I hadn't done anything wrong in her class, she had to spank me. Anyway, we went into the office, where she rang through to one of the secretaries to come to act as a witness. I noticed with trepidation the paddle lying on the desk ready. While she was waiting for the secretary to arrive, Coach B told me she was sorry I was in trouble, and that she had to do this, but that this was part of school life and discipline. She asked me if I had been spanked in school before, and I said I had a few times, which was a slight understatement, as my butt and the paddle were on pretty familiar terms. With that, the secretary arrived and Coach B told me to bend over the desk. I didn't feel my bottom to be very vulnerable because of my thin shorts, of course. I could have asked to change, but my skirt was very short and might not have covered the subject anyway. "Okay, Carrie, I've been asked by the AAP to give you 4 swats of the paddle, so let's get it over with," said Coach in a kind but firm voice. I felt the paddle rub on my bottom, then a good solid whack. "Boy, it hurts so much," I yelled and jumped up, clutching my bottom. Tears in my eyes as I felt the heat spreading through my cheeks. Coach B told me to bend over again, and repeated the process and whop. It hurt quite a bit more than the APS spankings, and the tears flowed freely. He process was then repeated for the 3rd swat, and I instinctively jumped up again, clutching my bottom in floods of tears. "One more, Carrie," said Coach B, and I tearfully bent over again, and felt the pedal rub against my thin shorts before the 4th swat landed. "It hurts so much." I Holland actually did a dance clutching my bottom, which appeared to be on fire. It was embarrassing in front of the secretary and my favorite coach, but I couldn't help it. Coach B then said she hoped she wouldn't have to do that again and I could go. So I made my way tearfully into the changing room where every eye appeared upon me. I quickly dressed and went into the shower and cried my eyes out at the end of it. I changed as quickly as I couldn't, try to look as normal as possible, which is very difficult when your face and your bottom are very red. Thankfully, a friend of mine had her mom pick her up and gave me a lift home. I had a job sitting in the car, and when I got home, I had an inquisition from Mom as to why I had got paddled. I think she thought I'd been rather hard, but she said if I must break school rules, I must expect to get spanked. Anyway, that night I slept on my tummy, and when I woke up I was still sore and it hurt when I sat down. The next day, I was still faster than usual than when I'd been paddled and had a couple of small bruises on my butt. I didn't want to meet Coach B, but as it happened, she was the first person I bumped into in the hall. I flushed with embarrassment, but she smiled and asked if I was okay. I said I was still a bit sore, resisting the temptation to rub my bottom. She looked a bit embarrassed again, and said he was sorry she had to spank me, but she hoped I realized she was just doing her job and it had to be done. I smiled faintly and nodded, though wishing to myself she hadn't done her job quite so thoroughly. One thing I'm glad about is that the spanking didn't sour the relationship. In fact, I was still in touch with her after I left school during my first year at college, and we actually became quite friendly despite the fact she could give a heck of a but spanking, and that first time was by no means the last.